You shouldn't be eating here. Vanessa's voice cut through the restaurant like a whip. The silverware stopped in mid-air. Conversations died. Even the background music seemed to lower its volume. All eyes turned to our table. To me, to the 71-year-old woman who had dared to sit at a dinner she apparently didn't deserve. This table is for my guests, she continued with that fake smile I knew so well. Not for just anyone. I didn't move. I didn't tremble. I didn't look down. I just held my water glass, the only object in front of me on that table filled with exquisite dishes, and watched as my daughter-in-law enjoyed her moment of power. Brandon, my son, my only son, remained silent beside me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the Granny's Voice channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are watching from now. We might give you a shout-out in our next video. Today's shout-out goes to Carla from New Jersey. Thank you for being part of this great family. Now, let me tell you what happened that day. His gaze was fixed on his plate of steak, as if the design of the sauce was the most fascinating thing in the world. The waiter, who had been about to approach me, stopped in his tracks. He looked at Vanessa, then at me, and finally retreated with the bread basket he was probably going to offer me. What consideration on his part, I thought ironically. At least he had intended to. Vanessa lifted her wine glass, an expensive Cabernet that shimmered under the restaurant lights, and toasted the woman sitting across from her. Karen Daniels, the wife of one of Brandon's business partners, a woman who had met me years ago, who had dined in my home, who had eaten my home-cooked meals. Now she looked at me with a mixture of pity and relief, thankful she wasn't the one being humiliated tonight. To new opportunities, Vanessa said, raising her glass higher, and to knowing who deserves to be in our lives. Everyone toasted, except me, of course. I had nothing to toast with except my lukewarm water. I heard the clinking of glasses, the approving murmur of the guests, and I felt the weight of Brandon's silence grow heavier beside me. My son, the man I had raised alone after his father died, didn't say a single word in my defense. But they didn't know. They couldn't know. While Vanessa savored her moment of triumph, while Brandon avoided my gaze like a coward, while the guests pretended not to be uncomfortable by the old woman relegated to the end of the table, I was thinking about something completely different. I was thinking about the manila folder hidden under my mattress. About the audio recordings saved on a prepaid phone they didn't know I had. About the conversations I had overheard without them knowing, about the documents I had photographed while they thought I was taking my useless old lady's nap. I was thinking about Thomas Rivera, the lawyer who had been our neighbor 20 years ago when Brandon was just a teenager. The same Tom I had fed for months when he was a broke college student. The same one who is now one of the most respected attorneys in the city. The same one who had told me on the phone just 3 days ago, "Mrs. Hayes, don't you worry. When the time comes, they are going to wish they had never underestimated you." So I sat there in my chair taking small sips of my water while they devoured their lobster tails and filet mignon. I watched them laugh, toast, and celebrate what they believed was their victory. Vanessa ordered a chocolate lava cake that cost $40. Brandon nodded at everything she said like a trained dog. The guests chatted about their upcoming vacations, about investments, about properties, and I just thought, they don't know that I already have everything prepared. No one noticed when I raised my hand to ask for the check. No one paid attention when I took out my own wallet, that old leather wallet that had belonged to my husband. No one realized when I left enough money on the table to cover my glass of water and a generous tip for the waiter who had tried to be kind. I stood up slowly with the dignity that 71 years of life had taught me. My chair made a small noise against the floor. Brandon looked up for the first time all night, surprised. Vanessa stopped talking mid-sentence. The guests looked at me with curiosity. "Excuse me," I said, my voice clear, firm, without tremors or tears. "I have to leave. I have an important meeting very early tomorrow morning." Vanessa laughed. A short, dismissive laugh. "A meeting? You? Please, Eleanor. Don't be ridiculous." I smiled. A small, almost imperceptible smile, but one I felt down to my bones. "Yes, Vanessa. A meeting with my lawyer. I think you and Brandon should consider finding one soon, too." The silence that followed was different from the last one. This one wasn't uncomfortable. It was ice cold. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Brandon turned pale, his knuckles white around his fork. Karen Daniels left her glass halfway to her lips. I didn't wait for answers. I didn't need to see their faces of confusion turn to panic. Not yet. That would come later. I took my coat from the back of the chair, put it on carefully, and walked toward the restaurant exit with my back straight and my head held high. Behind me, I heard the murmuring begin, the whispered questions. Vanessa's high-pitched voice trying to laugh it off as if it were all a joke. Brandon's low voice asking what I had meant by that. But I kept walking. I crossed the restaurant, feeling every stare on my back. I pushed open the glass door and stepped out into the cool night. The air filled my lungs like a breath of freedom. I paused for a moment on the sidewalk, looking at the city lights. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. It wasn't joy yet. It wasn't victory. But it was the beginning of something. The beginning of their end. The beginning of the start of my real life. I took my phone from my purse and dialed a number I already had memorized. "Tom," I said when he answered. "Yes, it's me. It's done. I did what you said. I planted the seed. Now, let them drown in their own paranoia." I heard his soft laugh on the other end of the line. "Perfect, Mrs. Hayes. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We'll go over every document. When we're finished, that house will be so protected, they won't even be able to ring the doorbell without a court order." I hung up and put the phone away. I raised my hand to hail a passing cab. As I got in, I cast one last look at the restaurant through the illuminated window. I could see Vanessa gesticulating wildly, Brandon with his head in his hands, the guests looking uncomfortable, wanting to escape a situation that had suddenly turned toxic. I smiled again, this time more broadly. "It's just beginning," I murmured to myself as the cab pulled away. "This is just beginning." The cab dropped me off in front of my house 20 minutes later, the house that had been my home for 43 years. The same one where I had raised Brandon, where I had mourned my husband's death, where I had celebrated birthdays and Christmases that now seemed to belong to another life, a life where I still believed a son's love was unconditional. I opened the door and the silence greeted me as always. A silence that no longer scared me, that no longer made me feel alone. I had gotten used to it. I turned on the living room light and everything was exactly as I had left it. The blanket folded on the sofa, the photographs on the mantel. Brandon as a child smiling with missing teeth. Brandon at his graduation hugging me with pride. Brandon on his wedding day with Vanessa on his arm and me beside them, still believing that my daughter-in-law would accept me as part of their new family. How naive I had been. I sat in my favorite chair, that rocking chair I had bought at a garage sale years ago, and closed my eyes. The images began to arrive as they always did when I was alone. The memories that had brought me to this night, to that restaurant, to that public humiliation they believed was their triumph. Everything had started to change 3 years ago. Not all at once, not with a dramatic event. It was gradual, like rust eating away at metal, unnoticed until everything falls apart. At first, it was the visits. Brandon used to come see me every Sunday. He'd arrive with pastries, sit in this very living room, and tell me about his work, about his plans. Vanessa came with him sometimes, always in a hurry, always looking at her phone. But at least she came. I would cook for them. I'd make the pot roast that Brandon had loved since he was a kid. I'd bake the apple pie that my husband used to say was the best in the world. Then Sundays became every other week. The excuses were reasonable. Too much work, social commitments, exhaustion. I understood, or at least I pretended to. I sent them food in Tupperware containers that were never returned. I'd call to see how they were. Brandon answered in one-word answers. "Yes, Mom." "No, Mom." "I'll call you later, Mom." Then it was once a month, then every 2 months, until one day I realized it had been 6 months since my son had last walked through my front door. But I kept calling, kept asking, kept being the mother who waits, who understands, who doesn't complain, because that's what they taught women of my generation. That love is shown with silence. That a good mother doesn't bother. That we should be grateful for the crumbs of attention they give us. The first time Vanessa showed her true colors was on my 69th birthday. I had planned a small dinner at my house. Nothing elaborate. I just wanted to see my son, share a moment together. I cooked his favorite meal. I bought a bottle of wine that had cost me $50, more than I usually spent, but it was my birthday and I wanted everything to be special. Brandon arrived late, an hour late. And when he walked in, Vanessa was behind him with an expression that made it clear she would rather be anywhere else. They didn't bring a gift, not even a card. Brandon muttered "Happy birthday, Mom," while checking his phone, and Vanessa sat on the edge of her chair as if she were afraid of catching poverty. They ate quickly. Vanessa barely touched the food. She said something about watching her figure, about home-cooked food being too heavy. Brandon didn't contradict her. I served the cake I had baked that morning and Vanessa refused it. "Too many calories," she said with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Besides, we have an important dinner in an hour. We can't stay." They left before I could even blow out the candles. I was left alone in my kitchen, looking at the untouched cake, the empty chairs, the food I had prepared with so much love that they had barely touched. I cried that night. I cried like I hadn't cried since my husband died. But I still didn't understand what was really happening. I still thought it was my fault, that maybe I was too demanding, that maybe my house wasn't elegant enough for the new life Brandon and Vanessa were building. Then came Christmas of that same year. I had saved for months to buy them gifts. An expensive dress shirt for Brandon, the kind he wore now for his business meetings. A French perfume for Vanessa, which I had seen on her vanity the last time I visited their apartment. I spent almost $400 in total. Money that my pension check barely covered, but to me, it was worth it. They were my family, my only family. I arrived at their apartment on the afternoon of Christmas Eve. I had taken 2 buses to get to that neighborhood where everything cost twice as much. I rang the doorbell with the gift bags in my hands, excited to spend Christmas Eve with them. Vanessa opened the door. She was wearing an elegant black dress, perfect makeup, high heels. She looked me up and down and I saw her expression change from surprise to disgust in less than a second. "Eleanor," she said, not opening the door all the way. "We didn't know you were coming." "I called last week," I answered, confused. "Brandon told me I could come for dinner." She sighed, a long exaggerated sigh, as if I were a problem that had appeared at the worst possible moment. "We have guests, important people, Brandon's partners. We can't have. It's not a family dinner." I stood frozen in the hallway. Behind Vanessa, I could hear laughter, soft music, the clinking of glasses. A party. They were having a Christmas party, and I wasn't invited. "But it's Christmas Eve," I murmured, feeling my voice break. "I know," Vanessa said impatiently. "That's why we have guests. Look, just leave the gifts here. Brandon will call you tomorrow or the day after." And she closed the door. Just like that. I was left standing in that elegant hallway with my gift bags in my hands, listening to the party continue on the other side. I heard Brandon's voice. He was laughing, telling some story. He didn't come looking for me. He didn't open the door to explain. He just left me there. I left the gifts in front of the door and walked away. I spent Christmas Eve alone in my house, eating store-bought cookies and watching old movies on television. The phone never rang. Brandon didn't call the next day, nor the next, nor the next. It was in that moment, sitting alone in my living room on New Year's Day, that something inside me began to break. Or maybe not break, maybe to wake up. I started asking myself questions I hadn't dared to ask before. Why was my son treating me like this? What had I done to deserve this contempt? Or was it that he simply had never cared and I had been too blind to see it? The following months were more of the same. Unanswered calls, ignored messages, vague excuses when he finally did pick up. And then came the day that changed everything. The day my eyes opened completely, and I saw the truth that had been hidden in front of me all this time. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had gone to the bank to cash my pension check, $1,200 a month. It wasn't much, but with what I had saved over the years, and the house paid off, I could live with dignity. As I left the bank, walking toward the bus stop, I saw them, Brandon and Vanessa, coming out of a real estate agency across the street. I hid behind a lamppost, feeling ridiculous, but unable to stop myself. I watched them talking to the agent. Vanessa was pointing at something on some papers. Brandon was nodding. They looked excited, happy, happier than I had seen them in years. Curious, I crossed the street when they left. I went into the agency pretending to be interested in a property. The agent, a young man named Trevor, was very polite. I asked him what kind of properties they had available. He showed me several listings. And then, trying to sound casual, I asked about the couple who had just left. "Oh, yes," he said, smiling. "They're looking for a house, something big, at least $300,000. They said they're going to have the down payment soon because they're about to receive an inheritance." An inheritance. The words cut through me like glass. I was still alive. I was still here. What inheritance were they talking about? I left that agency with my legs trembling. I sat on a bench in the nearby park trying to breathe, trying to understand. And then it all started to make sense. The visits that stopped, the contempt, the coldness. It wasn't that they didn't love me anymore. It was that they were waiting for me to die. They were waiting to get my house, my savings, everything I had built over lifetime. That night, in my house, I didn't cry. The crying was over. In its place, I felt something new, something cold and clear, a determination I didn't know existed inside me. If my son and his wife were planning my end, I was going to make sure the only end they witnessed was that of their own plans. I spent 3 days without sleep after that conversation at the real estate agency. 3 days turning their words over in my mind. An inheritance, $300,000. They were counting on my death as if it were a business deal, as if I were an investment that would soon pay off. On the 4th night, Brandon called me. It was strange because I hadn't heard from him in weeks. His voice sounded casual. Too casual. "Mom, how are you?" "I'm fine, son," I replied, trying to keep my voice normal. "And you?" "Good. Good. Hey, Vanessa and I were thinking it's been a while since we saw you. What do you think if we come visit you this Sunday?" My heart sped up. Something was wrong. After months of ignoring me, they suddenly wanted to see me. "Of course, son. I'll be waiting for you." That Sunday, they arrived on time. That was also strange. Brandon was never on time. Vanessa was carrying a large designer handbag, one of those that cost more than my monthly pension check. They came in smiling, being polite, asking about my health with an interest I hadn't seen in years. I made coffee and served them the pastries I had bought that morning. We sat in the living room and for 20 minutes everything was normal. Too normal. They talked about the weather, about their jobs, about some neighbors I didn't know. And then Brandon cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk about something important." I felt my stomach tighten. "Tell me." "It's about the house," he said, looking around. "This house is too big for you all alone, and you're getting older. What if you fall? What if you have an emergency and no one is around to help you?" Vanessa nodded with a concerned expression, so fake it almost made me laugh. "We've been researching, Eleanor. There are wonderful places for people your age. Communities where you'd have company, medical care, activities." "Nursing homes?" I asked directly. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. "They don't call them that, Mom. They're senior living communities, very dignified places. With your pension, you could afford a basic one," Vanessa continued. "And if you sell the house, you could be in a much better one. One with gardens, with 24-hour nurses." There it was, the plan. They wanted me to sell my house. The house my husband and I bought after years of saving. The house where I raised my son. The house that was the only thing I had left. "I don't want to sell my house," I said in a calm voice. "Mom, be reasonable." Brandon leaned forward. "What are you going to do here alone? This house needs maintenance. The roof has leaks. The pipes are old. Where are you going to get the money for repairs?" "I'll manage." "Don't be stubborn." Vanessa's voice lost some of its fake sweetness. "Think about what's best for you. In a community, you'd be safe, taken care of. Here you're isolated. Abandoned. The word abandoned left her mouth so easily. As if she wasn't part of the reason I was alone. As if she hadn't built a wall between my son and me. I need to think about it, I said finally. Brandon sighed in frustration. There's not much to think about, Mom. It's common sense. They left half an hour later, leaving brochures for retirement homes on my coffee table. Brochures that ended up in the trash as soon as I closed the door. But something else remained, a cold, hard certainty. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were trying to speed up my exit from this house, from this life I had built. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, and then I heard something, a noise coming from outside. I got up slowly, my heart pounding in my chest, and went to the window. Nothing. The street was empty. But as I was walking back to my bed, I noticed something strange. My purse was open. I always left it closed on the small table by the entrance. Always. I went to it, my hands trembling. My wallet was still there. My ID, too. But something was missing. The spare keys to my house. The ones I kept in an inner compartment of the purse. They were gone. I sat on the sofa processing what this meant. Brandon and Vanessa had been here. They knew where I kept my purse. One of them had taken those keys while I was in the kitchen making coffee. Now they had access to my house whenever they wanted. The next day, I hired a locksmith. I asked him to change all the locks. It cost me $200 I hadn't planned on spending, but I didn't care. When he finished, I felt a little safer, a little, but I knew this was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from the bank. A loan application in my name. $50,000 using my house as collateral. I hadn't applied for any loan. I called the bank immediately. They told me the application had been rejected because my signature didn't match the one they had on file, but someone had tried. Someone had tried to forge my signature to get money using my property. I didn't need to be a detective to know who it had been. I saved that letter. I put it in an old shoe box that I hid in the back of my closet. It was the first piece of proof, the first piece of evidence of what my son and daughter-in-law were doing. I started paying attention to things I had ignored before. I started keeping my important documents in a safe place. The deed to my house, my will, my bank statements. I put everything in that box and I started writing down dates, times, conversations. A month later, Brandon visited again. This time, he came alone. He brought Chinese takeout, the kind that costs $20 that he knew I liked. He sat with me. He acted like the son I remembered from years ago. He asked me how I was. He told me about his work. He almost convinced me it had all been my imagination, that maybe I was just being paranoid. Then, as if it were an afterthought, he pulled some papers from his briefcase. Mom, I need you to sign something. What is it? It's a power of attorney, just so I can help you with your things if you ever need it. If you have to go to the hospital or if you need someone to manage your finances for a while. I took the papers. I read them slowly, even though my eyes weren't what they used to be. Durable power of attorney. That meant he could do whatever he wanted with my money, with my house, with me. He could sell my property. He could put me in any facility. He could empty my bank account. I'm not signing this, Brandon. His expression changed. The mask fell for a second, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Anger. Frustration. Mom, it's for your own good. What if you get sick? What if you become incapacitated? If that happens, we'll see. But I'm not signing anything now. He stood up abruptly. The papers fell to the floor. You're impossible. You know that. Impossible. Stubborn. We're trying to help you and you fight us every step of the way. Help me. I looked at him steadily. How did you help me when I spent Christmas alone? How did you help me when you closed the door in my face on Christmas Eve? That was different. We had commitments. You always have commitments, except when you want something from me. Brandon picked up his papers with jerky movements. You know what, Mom? Do whatever you want. Stay here alone in this old house. Wait for something to happen to you and for there to be no one to help you, but don't come crying to us later." He left, slamming the door. I sat there in my living room, trembling, but not from fear, from something different, from determination. Because now I knew for sure, my son wasn't worried about my well-being. He was worried about my money. That night, I did something I had never done. I searched online for how to hire a private investigator. I had no idea how much it cost. I didn't know if my pension would cover it, but I needed to know exactly what they were planning. I needed concrete proof, because if they were going to play dirty, I had to be prepared. I found several ads. I chose one that seemed professional but not too expensive. A woman named Rachel Winters. Her website said she specialized in cases of family fraud and elder abuse. Perfect. I called her the next day. My voice was trembling when I explained my situation. She listened in silence, and when I finished, she said something I'll never forget. "Mrs. Hayes, you did the right thing by calling. What you're describing is more common than you think. And if your suspicions are correct, we need to act quickly before they do something irreversible." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next day. I brought her all the documents I had saved. The letter from the bank, the noted dates, the retirement home brochures, everything. Rachel reviewed every paper with professional attention. When she finished, she looked up and met my eyes with a mixture of compassion and determination. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm going to be honest with you. What we have here are clear indicators of attempted fraud and possible financial abuse. I need your authorization to investigate your son and daughter-in-law. I'll need to follow them, document their movements, see who they're meeting with. It's going to cost $1,000 upfront and then $500 a week." $1,000. Almost my entire monthly pension. But what choice did I have? "Do it," I said without hesitation. "I need to know the truth." Rachel Winters began her investigation the following Monday. I went on with my normal life, or at least I tried to. I got up early, made my coffee, watered the plants, watched the news, but inside, every fiber of my being was on high alert, waiting, watching, preparing for what was to come. The first week, Rachel called me 3 times to report her findings. Brandon and Vanessa had visited 4 different real estate agencies. In all of them, they asked the same thing: how much could a house like mine be worth in the current market? The answers varied between $250,000 and $300,000. My house, the house I was still living in. The house they were already selling in their minds. "There's more," Rachel said in the 4th call. I followed him to a law firm, one that specializes in estates and wills. They were in there for almost 2 hours. "Were you able to find out what they discussed?" "I have a contact at that firm. He owes me a favor. Give me 1 more day." The next day, Rachel came to my house with a manila folder. Her expression was grim as she sat across from me at the kitchen table. "Mrs. Hayes, what I'm about to tell you is not easy to hear." "Tell me. I need to know." She opened the folder and took out several papers. They consulted on how to obtain legal guardianship over an elderly person. Specifically, they asked what's needed to declare someone incapacitated, unable to manage their own affairs. The words landed like stones in my stomach. Incapacitated. Yes. They asked about the legal process, how long it takes, what kind of medical evaluations are needed. And this is the worst part. They asked if a private doctor could perform those evaluations, one that they chose. I sat in silence, processing. They didn't just want my house. They wanted to declare me incapacitated. They wanted to take away my freedom, my autonomy, my right to decide about my own life. There's something else. Rachel pulled out photographs. I followed them yesterday afternoon. They went to a place called Sunny Hills Retirement Home. It's a nursing home, one of the cheapest in the city. I looked at the photographs. Brandon and Vanessa entering the building. A grey, sad building with peeling paint and bars on the windows. Nothing like the elegant brochures they had shown me. I spoke to an employee who works there, Rachel continued. She told me a young couple came in asking about the costs. The place costs $1,000 a month. Basic, no frills. They were told that they accept people with pensions who can pay the residents directly. My pension, $1,200 a month. If they put me in there, they would control the remaining $200, and they would have my house to sell. I would be locked away, controlled, stripped of everything. How much do you need to keep investigating? I asked, my voice firm. Mrs. Hayes, I already have enough for you to take legal action. No. I need more. I need this to be so solid they can't deny it, so they can't escape. Keep investigating for as long as it takes. Rachel looked at me with respect. As you wish. But I also recommend you take preventative measures, protect your assets, talk to a lawyer. I already did. Well, I'm about to. That afternoon, I called Thomas Rivera. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I remembered his mother had given me his number when we ran into each other at the market months ago. She had told me, if you ever need legal help, my Tom is right here in the city. He's a good lawyer. And he never forgot what you did for him. What I did for him was simple. When Tom was a law student, he lived in the apartment next to ours. He was a thin boy, always with books under his arm, always studying. His family was poor. He worked at night and studied during the day. More than once, I saw him eating plain bread. So, I started cooking extra. Every time I made chicken, I saved a plate for him. When I baked, I brought him something. It wasn't charity. It was just being human. Mrs. Hayes. His voice sounded surprised when I explained who I was. Of course, I remember you. How are you? I need your help, Tom. I need a lawyer, and I need someone I can trust. Tell me where and when. I'll be there. We met 2 days later at his office. It was a modest but professional space. Tom had grown up. He was no longer the skinny kid eating my food. He was a man in his 40s in a formal suit with an intelligent gaze. But when he saw me walk in, he stood up and hugged me like I was his own mother. Mrs. Hayes, tell me everything. I told him every detail. The real estate agency, the stolen keys, the attempted fraudulent loan, the power of attorney papers, the visit to the estate lawyer, the nursing home, everything. Tom took notes, his expression growing more serious. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long sigh. Mrs. Hayes, what you're describing is a clear-cut case of elder financial abuse, possible attempted fraud, and conspiracy to commit unlawful imprisonment. Can I do something? You can do a lot. First, we are going to legally shield everything you own, your house, your bank accounts, any investments or savings. We're going to create an irrevocable trust, which means that even if you wanted to, you couldn't sell or gift those assets without the approval of the trust administrators. And those administrators will be me and another attorney from my firm. How much is this going to cost? Tom smiled. Mrs. Hayes, you fed me for 2 years when I had nothing. You treated me with dignity when others looked at me with pity. How much do you think that's worth? You don't owe me a cent. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. Thank you, Tom. There's something else we can do, he continued. We can set a legal trap, make them incriminate themselves. But to do that, you're going to have to be very brave. You're going to have to confront them. You're going to have to record conversations, get them to admit their plans. Are you willing to do that? Yes. Whatever it takes. For the next 2 weeks, my life became a performance. Tom taught me how to use a small recorder that fit in my jacket pocket. He taught me what questions to ask, how to steer a conversation so the other person would reveal information without realizing it. I practiced in front of the mirror. I practiced my expression of a confused old woman, my trembling voice, my apparent frailty. If they saw me as a weak, naive old woman, I would use that perception against them. The first test was when Brandon came to visit on a Wednesday afternoon. He came alone again. I had the recorder in the pocket of my apron. My heart was beating so hard I was afraid he could hear it. Hi, Mom. I brought your favorite magazine, he said, leaving a crossword puzzle book on the table. Thank you, son. How thoughtful of you. I'll make us some coffee. We sat down. We talked about trivial things for 10 minutes. Then, as if I had just remembered, I said, "Brandon, I've been thinking about what you said about the house." I saw his eyes light up. "Yes. You're right. It's too big for me alone, and the repairs. I don't know if I can keep paying for them." "Exactly, Mom. I'm glad you're being reasonable." "But I'm scared," I said, vulnerable voice. "If I sell the house, where will I live?" "We already told you. In a community, a place where you'll be taken care of. Like that one you showed me in the photos. Sunny Hills." Brandon tensed for a second. "How do you know about that place?" "I saw the brochure you left last time. It looks like a good place." "It is adequate. It has what you need." "And how much does it cost?" "Don't you worry about that. Your pension will cover it." "And the money from the house? Where will that go?" Here it came. The important part. Tom had told me to pay attention to how he would answer. "Well, Mom, the logical thing is for me to manage it for you, so you don't have to worry about that stuff. So you can be comfortable in the community without the stress of payments or paperwork." "And what if I need something? What if I want to leave?" Brandon cleared his throat. "Communities have rules, Mom. You can't just leave whenever you want. It's for security, but you can have visitors." "Would you visit me?" There was a long pause. Too long. "Of course, Mom. When we can." When we can. Not when he wanted to. When they could. The truth was there, floating between us like poison smoke. "Let me think about it a little more," I said finally. The frustration on his face was obvious. "Mom, there's not much to think about. The longer you wait, the more complicated everything gets." "I know, son. Just give me a few more days." When he left, I turned off the recorder and listened to the whole thing. Every word was there. His plan, his intention, his coldness. Tom was right. They were digging their own graves. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from fear, from something different. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something like power. I wasn't the victim. Not anymore. I was the hunter, and my prey had no idea what was coming for them. I called Rachel. "I need you to step up the surveillance. I want to know every move they make, every meeting, every call if possible." "That's going to cost more." "I don't care. Use my entire savings if you have to. This has to be perfect." Because I was building something. Not just a defense, a trap. A net so tight that when they finally fell into it, there would be no way out. And the perfect moment to close that net was coming. I could feel it in my bones. In the way Brandon was pressing harder and harder. In the desperation that was starting to seep into Vanessa's actions. They thought I was the weak prey. They would soon discover that the old woman they had underestimated had teeth, and she was ready to bite. Rachel called me on a Friday morning. Her voice sounded different. Urgent. "Mrs. Hayes, I need you to come to my office. Now. I have something you need to see." I took a cab. I didn't want to waste time waiting for the bus. When I arrived, Rachel had her computer open and several documents spread across her desk. "Sit down," she said, pointing to the chair opposite her. "This is serious." She showed me photographs. Brandon and Vanessa entering a building I recognized immediately. The municipal hospital. Then more photos. Them leaving with a man in a white coat. "A doctor. This is Dr. Kenneth Bradley," Rachel explained. "A psychiatrist. He has a private practice, but he also works at the hospital. And he has an interesting reputation." "What kind of reputation?" "The kind that charges extra for convenient diagnoses, if you understand what I mean." I felt a chill run down my spine. They want to declare me crazy. "Not just that. Look at this." Rachel pulled out more papers. I got copies of emails between Vanessa and this doctor. They were careless. They used the hospital's Wi-Fi and my contact in IT was able to access them. It says right here, and I quote, "We need a psychiatric evaluation demonstrating advanced senile dementia, incapacity to make decisions necessary for the guardianship process." What would your collaboration cost? The words danced in front of my eyes. Senile dementia. Incapacity. Guardianship. It was all there in black and white. The complete plan. And he accepted. He's still negotiating the price, but yes, he basically accepted. He wants $5,000 upfront and the evaluation scheduled for 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks. Time was running out. If that doctor evaluated me and signed a paper saying I was demented, Brandon could use that to take everything from me. My house, my freedom, my life. We have to act, I said, my voice firm. Now. We can't wait any longer. I agree. Do you have an idea of how you want to do this? Yes. I'm going to give them exactly what they want. I'm going to make them think they've won, and then I'm going to destroy them in front of everyone. That afternoon, I went to see Tom. I showed him everything Rachel had discovered. He reviewed every document with a lawyer's precision. When he finished, he whistled softly. Mrs. Hayes, this is enough to charge your son with fraud, conspiracy, and attempted unlawful imprisonment. That doctor could lose his license, and Vanessa can be charged as an accomplice. I don't just want legal charges, Tom. I want real justice. I want them to lose everything, just like they wanted me to lose everything. Tom smiled. A smile that reminded me of the smart kid he used to be. Then we're going to do this right. We're going to plan every detail. And I need you to promise me something. What? That you won't hesitate. That when the time comes, you'll be as tough as you need to be. Because your son is going to cry. He's going to beg. He's going to say he's sorry, and you have to stand firm. I looked him in the eye. My son ceased to exist the day he decided to see me as an obstacle instead of his mother. The man I'm going to confront is a stranger who happens to have my blood. I won't hesitate. Good. Then here's what we're going to do. Tom pulled out a calendar. He marked a date 3 weeks in the future. This day is going to be your 72nd birthday. We are going to throw a dinner, a celebration. You're going to invite Brandon, Vanessa, and any other family members you think are necessary. You're going to tell them you have an important announcement to make. What kind of announcement? You're going to tell them you've finally made a decision about the house, that you're going to sign all the necessary papers, that you're ready to move into the community. That will make them come. It will make them feel safe, confident. And then we're going to give them the show of their lives. But before that, we need to prepare a few things. First, we are going to legally transfer your house into that irrevocable trust. That means that even if you wanted to, you couldn't sell it or give it away. And my bank accounts. Same thing. Everything protected. Second, we're going to make certified copies of all the evidence, the emails, the recordings, the photographs, everything. And we're going to file a preliminary report with the district attorney's office. Not for them to act yet, but so there's a record that you reported this before they could make their move. And the doctor, the one they wanted to evaluate me. Tom smiled more broadly. I've already spoken with the state medical board. They have an ethics department. I passed them the information. They are very interested. Very interested. That doctor won't be able to do anything to you, and he'll probably lose his license before the month is over. I leaned back in the chair, feeling it all start to take shape. A plan, solid, complete, unbeatable. And at the dinner, what's going to happen exactly? It will be simple. You'll start by saying you have an important announcement. You'll make them suffer a bit. You'll talk about how difficult this decision has been. And just when they think they've won, when they're smiling and toasting, you're going to drop the truth, all the evidence, everything we know, in front of witnesses. Witnesses. Yes. We're going to invite some key people, neighbors who know you, maybe a distant relative, people who can testify later about what they saw and heard. And I'll be there, too, as your attorney to make sure everything is legal. And after, Mrs. Hayes, you're going to get your life back. You're going to break with the people who betrayed you, and you're going to start over on your own terms. I left Tom's office with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, real, solid. For the first time since this all began, I felt like I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to win. I spent the following days preparing. I called Brandon and told him exactly what Tom had advised. That I had made a decision. That I wanted to celebrate my birthday with a special dinner. That I had an important announcement to make. Brandon could barely contain his excitement. Of course, Mom. Absolutely. Where do you want it to be? At a restaurant? No. Here. In my house. In the house where I raised you. One last dinner in this place. There was a silence. Then, whatever you want, Mom. We'll be there. I hung up the phone and looked around my living room. The walls that had seen so many years of my life, the good and bad memories that lived in every corner. In 3 weeks, everything would change. In 3 weeks, my son would discover that the old woman he had underestimated was much stronger than he ever imagined. The 3 weeks passed like both a sigh and an eternity. Every day I woke up with a clear purpose. I rehearsed my words in front of the mirror. I practiced my expression, my tone of voice. Tom was right. This had to be perfect. The morning of my birthday dawned clear and cold. I got up early and started cleaning the house. Every corner, every surface. I wanted everything to be spotless. Not for them, for me. This house was my testimony, my fortress. And tonight it would be the stage for my victory. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Tom arrived with 2 other people. A woman in her 50s with a serious expression and a leather briefcase. This is Nina Patel, my partner. She will be present as a legal witness to everything that happens tonight. The other person was a young man with a discreet camera. This is Jordan. He's going to document everything, audio and video. He'll be in the next room, but his equipment will capture every word. Is it legal to record without them knowing? I asked. In your own home with your consent, documenting what could be a confession to crimes against you. Completely legal, Nina replied in a professional voice. We spent the afternoon preparing. Jordan installed small microphones in strategic places in the living and dining rooms, button-sized cameras hidden among the knickknacks on the mantel, all invisible to an untrained eye. At 6 o'clock, the guests began to arrive. First came Karen Daniels, my neighbor from years ago. I had invited her, telling her I wanted to celebrate surrounded by people who truly knew me. She brought flowers and a sincere hug. Then came Mr. O'Brien, the man who owned the corner store, a 75-year-old man who had known me since I moved into this neighborhood. Mrs. Hayes, it's an honor to be here, he said in his gravelly voice. There were 6 people in total besides Brandon and Vanessa, who hadn't arrived yet. Enough witnesses, enough of an audience for what was to come. Tom moved discreetly through the house, checking that everything was in order. Nina sat in a corner of the living room, observing everything with a lawyer's eyes. Jordan had disappeared into the back room from where he would control all the recording equipment. At 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. My heart sped up, but I kept my expression calm. I opened the door, and there they were. Brandon in a grey suit that probably cost more than my pension for 2 months. Vanessa in a tight red dress and heels so high I wondered how she could walk in them. Happy birthday, Mom, Brandon said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. His voice sounded happy. Too happy. As if he were already celebrating his victory. Vanessa handed me a wrapped box. A little something for you, Eleanor. I took it without opening it. I knew that whatever was inside had no real value. It was just part of their performance. They entered the living room and their expressions changed slightly when they saw the other people. I didn't know there would be other guests, Brandon said with a forced smile. I wanted to celebrate with people who have been important in my life, I replied in a soft voice. Karen, Mr. O'Brien, some friends from the neighborhood. I hope you don't mind. Of course not, Vanessa lied, though her eyes said otherwise. She had expected an intimate dinner where they could manipulate me without witnesses. We all sat around the dining room table. I had prepared simple but plentiful food. Roast chicken, rice, salad, homemade bread. Nothing fancy, but made with my own hands. Perhaps the last meal I would ever make for my son. During dinner, the conversation was superficial. The weather, the news. Karen told stories about the neighborhood. Mr. O'Brien talked about how the city had changed in recent years. Brandon and Vanessa smiled and nodded, but I could see the impatience in their eyes. They wanted to get to the announcement. They wanted to hear the words that would make them rich. After the main course, I stood up. Silence fell over the table. All eyes turned to me. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice clear. "Turning 72 is a privilege not everyone gets. I've lived a long life. I've seen good things and bad things. I've loved. I've lost. I've learned." Brandon leaned forward in his chair. Vanessa had her hands clasped on the table, her knuckles white with anticipation. "As some of you know, I've been thinking a lot about my future, about this house, about what's next for me in the years I have left." I saw Vanessa give Brandon a discreet nudge. He nodded almost imperceptibly. "And after much reflection, I have made an important decision." The silence was so thick I could hear my own heart beating. Brandon and Vanessa were on the edge of their seats. Karen looked at me with concern. Mr. O'Brien had his brow furrowed. "I have decided," I continued, letting each word fall like a drop of water in a silent pond, "that this house stays with me, that my savings stay with me, that my life stays with me." Confusion flickered across Brandon's face. "What? But, Mom, you said you had an important announcement. You said you'd made a decision." And I did. The decision to never let myself be manipulated again. Vanessa laughed nervously. I don't understand what you're talking about, Eleanor. No one is manipulating you." "No." I took the small recorder from my pocket and placed it on the table. "Then maybe you can explain this." I pressed play. Brandon's voice filled the dining room. "The logical thing is for me to manage it for you so you don't have to worry about that stuff. So you can be comfortable in the community without the stress of payments or paperwork." Then my voice. "And what if I need something? What if I want to leave?" And Brandon again. "Communities have rules, Mom. You can't just leave whenever you want. It's for security." The color drained from my son's face. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "That's not all," I said, my voice stronger now. Tom stood up and came to my side. Nina opened her briefcase and began to take out documents. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tom said in his professional voice. "My name is Thomas Rivera, and I am Mrs. Eleanor Hayes's attorney. What you are about to witness is the presentation of evidence of attempted fraud and financial abuse against a senior citizen. Everything said here is being recorded with the consent of the property owner and will be used as legal evidence." Brandon shot to his feet. "This is absurd, Mom. What is this? What's happening?" "What's happening, Brandon, is that I found out every lie, every plan, every betrayal." Nina began passing documents across the table. Photographs of Brandon and Vanessa entering the real estate agencies, copies of the emails with Dr. Bradley, records of their visit to the Sunny Hills nursing home, the attempted fraudulent loan application, everything. "This can't be real," Vanessa muttered, picking up one of the papers with trembling hands. This is an invasion of privacy." "This is evidence," Nina corrected her coolly. "Evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. Evidence of attempted unlawful imprisonment. Evidence of elder financial abuse. Shall I continue?" Karen let out a small gasp. Mr. O'Brien was shaking his head, disbelieving. The other guests looked at Brandon and Vanessa with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. "Brandon," I said, and my voice sounded different even to me. Harder. Colder. "For 71 years, I was your mother. I gave you everything. My time, my love, my entire life. And you decided I was just an obstacle between you and a little bit of money. Mom, it's not like that. It's not what it looks like. Isn't it? Then tell me, son. Tell me you didn't plan to have me declared demented. Tell me you didn't talk to a corrupt doctor to sign false papers. Tell me you weren't looking for a cheap nursing home to lock me up in while you sold my house." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, but no words came out. Just silence. The silence of a man trapped in his own lie. "Let's go, Brandon." Vanessa stood up. We don't have to listen to this. Sit down. Tom's voice was like a whip. We're not finished yet. Vanessa remained standing, trembling with rage. Brandon was still seated, pale as death, staring at the documents scattered on the table as if they were poisonous snakes. Sit down, Vanessa, I repeated, this time my voice allowing no argument. This is just beginning. She fell back into the chair with a thud. Her dark eyes were shooting invisible daggers at me, but I didn't care anymore. The time for being afraid was over. Tom nodded toward the back room. Jordan came out with a laptop and a small projector. In seconds, the white wall of my dining room became a screen. What you are about to see, Tom explained, is material gathered over the last 6 weeks by a private investigator hired by Mrs. Hayes. The first image appeared. Brandon and Vanessa entering the real estate agency on Mel Street. The date and time were in the bottom corner. Jordan had edited the video to show only the essentials. Here we can see them consulting on the market value of this property. Tom narrated as if he were in a courtroom. A property that does not belong to them. A property inhabited by a person who is still alive and in full possession of her faculties. The video changed. Now it was the estate lawyer's office. The camera had caught them entering and leaving. The timestamp showed they had been inside for 2 hours and 15 minutes. During this visit, Tom continued, they consulted on the procedures for obtaining legal guardianship over a senior. Specifically, they asked what was needed to declare someone incapacitated. That's not a crime, Vanessa interjected, her voice high-pitched. We were just getting information, preparing for the future. The future. Nina held up another document. You mean the future where Mrs. Hayes would be declared demented by a corrupt psychiatrist? That future. The next video showed them at the hospital meeting with Dr. Bradley. The camera had captured them in the parking lot afterward when they thought no one was watching. Brandon was handing an envelope to Vanessa. She was counting money, green bills, dollars. That envelope contained $2,000, Tom said. A down payment for Dr. Bradley. The full payment was to be $5,000 once he signed the false psychiatric evaluation. Lies. Brandon shouted, standing up again. This is a setup. Those pictures could be anything. Jordan pressed another key. Now the screen showed text. Emails, dated, with the sender and recipient clearly visible. Vanessa's email. Dr. Bradley's email. We need a psychiatric evaluation demonstrating advanced senile dementia, Tom read aloud. Incapacity to make decisions necessary for the guardianship process. What would your collaboration cost? Karen gasped again. Mr. Bryan stood up and walked over to Brandon. He looked him directly in the eyes. Son, I knew your father. He was a good man, a man of honor. He would be dying of shame if he could see this. Brandon looked down. He couldn't meet the old man's eyes. There's more, I said, taking control of the situation again. Show them the nursing home. The video changed. Brandon and Vanessa entering the grey building of Sunny Hills, the peeling facade, the bars on the windows, the faded sign. It wasn't the elegant community from the brochures they had shown me. It was a warehouse for forgotten old people. This place costs $1,000 a month, I explained, looking directly at my son. Just about what my pension covers. $1,200 minus $1,000 for the home leaves $200 for you. And my house valued between $250,000 and $300,000. A good deal, right, Brandon? Mom, I never, his voice broke. Never what? Never planned to lock me in that place. Never dreamed of selling my house. Never calculated how much money you'd get from my living death. Tears began to roll down Brandon's cheeks, but I felt no compassion. I had spent all my tears on the lonely nights, on the Christmases without him, on the forgotten birthdays. Nina, please show them the last document, I asked. Nina produced an official paper. It had the bank's letterhead. This is the report of an attempted fraudulent loan application. $50,000 using this property as collateral. The signature did not match the one on file, so it was rejected. But someone tried. Does either of you want to explain who it was? The silence was absolute. Only the sound of Vanessa's ragged breathing and Brandon's choked sobs. I have a theory, I continued. I believe Brandon took my keys one of the times he came, made copies. I believe you entered my house when I wasn't here. You looked for documents, photographed my deed, tried to forge my signature. And when that failed, you moved on to Plan B, declaring me insane. Mrs. Hayes. Tom took the floor again. Do you wish to press formal charges against these individuals for the crimes of attempted fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and planning unlawful imprisonment? All eyes were on me. Brandon looked at me with a mixture of terror and pleading. Vanessa had lost all her arrogance. She looked like a cornered animal. Not yet, I answered. First, I want them to understand something. I walked over to Brandon, stood in front of him, so close I could see the tears on his eyelashes, the same eyelashes I had wiped clean when he was a child and cried over a scraped knee. For 71 years, I was your mother. I carried you. I fed you. I took care of you when you were sick. I worked double shifts to pay for your school when your father died. I went without eating more than once so you would have food on your plate. Do you remember that, Brandon? He nodded, unable to speak. And all that time, I believed I was raising a good man, an honest man, someone who would take care of me when I needed it, just as I took care of him. But I was wrong. What I raised was a stranger. A stranger with my last name and without my heart. Mom, please. Don't call me Mom. You lost that right the day you decided I was worth less than a bit of money. I turned to the guests. Karen was crying silently. Mr. O'Brien's jaw was tight. The others looked on with expressions of shock and disgust. I want all of you to be witnesses to what I am about to say. Tom, Nina, make sure this is recorded. Tom nodded. Jordan adjusted the camera from the other room. Brandon Hayes, I said, my voice firm and clear. From this moment on, you are no longer my son. I am disinheriting you completely. You will not receive 1 cent from me. Not one object from this house. Nothing. You can't do that, Vanessa shrieked, jumping to her feet again. The law forces you to leave him something. We're family. Nina smiled coldly. Actually, Mrs. Hayes can dispose of her assets as she wishes, and she already has. Everything is in an irrevocable trust, signed, notarized, legal. You have no claim to anything. Furthermore, Tom added, given the material we have, you could be facing criminal charges. That depends on what Mrs. Hayes decides, but I suggest you get a good lawyer, a better one than the one you consulted to rob an old woman. Brandon fell to his knees in front of me, literally on his knees, his hands clasped as if in prayer. Mom, please. It was a mistake. It was all a mistake. I love you. You're my mother. You can't do this. I looked down at him. This man in his 40s crying at my feet. And I felt nothing. Not love, not hate, not even pity. Just an empty space where my mother's heart used to be. Get up, I ordered. You don't have to act anymore. We both know the truth. He staggered to his feet. Vanessa grabbed his arm, more to support herself than him. You have 5 minutes to get out of my house, I said, looking at the clock on the wall. If you don't, Tom will call the police, and we will turn over all the evidence tonight. Do you understand? This isn't over, Vanessa threatened, finding some of her voice again. We'll fight this. We'll sue you. You'll what? I interrupted her. Hire lawyers with what money? Buy your $300,000 house with what down payment? What exactly are you going to do? They had no answer because they finally understood. They had lost, completely, totally, with no chance of recovery. Brandon walked toward the door like a zombie. Vanessa followed him. Before leaving, my son turned back one last time. Mom. Get out, I said without emotion. And never come back. The door closed behind them. The silence that followed was deep, almost sacred. After the door closed, I stood in the center of my living room, staring at that piece of wood as if I could see through it, as if I could see Brandon and Vanessa walking down the steps, getting into their expensive car and driving away from the life they had planned to steal. Karen was the first to move. She came over and hugged me without a word. I felt her tears on my shoulder. Mr. Bryan came over too and put his rough hand on my arm. "You did the right thing, Eleanor," he said gravely. "The right thing isn't always the easy thing." The other guests said their goodbyes one by one, each with words of support, each promising that if I ever needed anything, I just had to call. When the last one left, it was just Tom, Nina, Jordan, and me. "How do you feel?" Tom asked. "Empty," I answered honestly. "But also free. For the first time in years, I feel free." Nina began gathering the documents. Jordan dismantled the recording equipment. Tom sat with me on the sofa. "We're not finished yet," he said softly. "This was just the confrontation. Now comes the legal part. We have to decide if we press criminal charges or if we simply ensure they can never come near you again. What do you recommend?" Honestly, with all this evidence, they could go to prison, especially with the Dr. Bradley issue. Fraud, conspiracy, forgery. We're talking about potential years of jail time. I sat in silence, thinking, did I want to see my son in prison? Did I want to be responsible for completely destroying his life? But, Tom continued, we can also do something different. We can file a restraining order, legally forbid them from coming near you or your property. We can make sure Dr. Bradley loses his license and faces his own consequences. And we can hold on to all this evidence as leverage. If they ever try anything again, then yes, we go all in. That, I said finally. That's what I want. I don't want to see him in prison. He's not my son anymore, but I don't want to be his executioner either. I just want them to leave me alone. Then that's what we'll do, Nina said, closing her briefcase. First thing tomorrow morning, we file the restraining order. I'm also sending all the information on Dr. Bradley to the medical board and the DA's office. That man is going to lose everything. And my house, my money, everything is protected. Completely, Tom assured me. The trust is irrevocable. No one can touch it. Your pension goes directly into a new account that only you control. Your will is updated, leaving everything to charity. Brandon and Vanessa have no legal path to get anything. After they all left, I was alone in my house. The silence was different now. It wasn't the heavy silence of loneliness and abandonment. It was the silence of peace, of the end of a battle. I walked through each room, turning off the lights. In the kitchen, I gathered the plates from dinner, the food I had prepared for what I thought would be my last supper with my son. I put the leftovers in the refrigerator. I'd take them to Mr. Bryan tomorrow. He would appreciate them. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. No nightmares. No waking up every hour wondering what they were planning. No constant weight on my chest. The following days were a whirlwind of legal activity. Tom and Nina filed all the necessary documents. The restraining order was approved in 48 hours. Brandon and Vanessa were legally forbidden from coming within 100 yards of me or my property. If they did, they would go directly to jail. Dr. Bradley was summoned by the medical board. When confronted with the evidence of the emails and photographs, he had no defense. His license was suspended immediately. I heard later that he was also facing criminal charges. His career was over. A week after the confrontation, Tom called me. "Eleanor, Brandon hired a lawyer. They want to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" "They have nothing to negotiate. They want you to drop the restraining order. They say Brandon wants to apologize properly. That he wants to try to rebuild the relationship." I laughed, a bitter laugh. "Tell them no. Tell them the restraining order stands. Tell them I don't want their apologies. I don't want anything from them." "Are you sure?" "Completely." But the calls didn't stop there. Brandon got my new number somehow. He called me crying. He left voicemails begging, saying he was sorry, that he had been weak, that Vanessa had manipulated him. All the excuses someone can give when they finally face the consequences of their actions. I blocked the number. I changed my number again. I gave the new one only to the people I trusted. A month later, Karen told me she had seen Brandon and Vanessa. They were selling things, their expensive car, designer clothes, jewelry. Apparently, they had spent more money than they had, anticipating my money. Now, they were in debt, desperate. How does that make you feel? Karen asked. Nothing, I replied honestly. I feel nothing. And it was true. The love I had felt for my son had been extinguished like a candle without oxygen. I didn't hate him. He just didn't exist for me anymore. 2 months after the confrontation, I was at the market buying vegetables when I saw Vanessa. She was in the opposite aisle. She looked different. No makeup, simple clothes, her hair unkempt. Our eyes met for a second. I saw fear in her gaze. Fear that I would shout, that I would cause a scene, that I would humiliate her publicly as she had humiliated me. But I did no such thing. I just looked away and continued with my shopping. She wasn't worth another second of my attention. In the 3rd month, Tom visited me with news. Brandon and Vanessa are getting a divorce. I'm not surprised. The plan was the money. Without the money, there's no reason to be together. There's something else. Brandon sold the apartment where they lived. Apparently, he's moving to another city. Says he wants to start over, far away from here. Good for him, I said without emotion. I hope his new life is better than the one he tried to build on my ashes. Tom looked at me with something like admiration. You're the strongest woman I know, Eleanor. I'm not strong, Tom. I'm just a woman who got tired of being weak. But there was one more thing I needed to do. One last piece I needed to close. I called Rachel Winters, the investigator. Rachel, I need one last favor. Name it. I need you to find out about Sunny Hills Retirement Home. That place they wanted to lock me in. I want to know how they treat the elderly there. A week later, Rachel came back with a report that chilled my blood. Sunny Hills had multiple complaints of abuse, malnourished seniors, lack of medical care, unsanitary conditions. The place was under investigation but was still operating on legal technicalities. How many seniors are there? I asked. 22 currently. And how much would it cost to move them to a better place? Rachel looked at me confused. What? I have savings. $60,000 that I saved my entire life. I was planning on leaving it to Brandon, but now that money has no destination. How much would it cost to pay for the transfer of those seniors to a dignified home, at least for 6 months, while they find something better? Rachel did the math. Probably about $50,000, maybe a little more. Do it. Use my money. Get them out of there. Let at least one good thing come out of all this. And that's how 22 seniors who were supposed to be my fellow inmates ended up being rescued. How the money Brandon coveted ended up saving lives instead of destroying mine. When it was all done, when the seniors were transferred and the investigation into Sunny Hills intensified until they finally shut the place down, I sat on my porch on a sunny afternoon with a cup of tea. I looked at my house, my garden, my life. It was all still mine. Not because I had fought with violence, not because I had screamed or threatened, but because I had used the only weapon that truly matters, the truth. The cold, hard, documented, undeniable truth. The truth that doesn't need to shout because it speaks for itself. 6 months have passed since that night. 6 months since I closed the door behind Brandon and Vanessa for the last time. 6 months since I got my life back. This morning, I woke up early as always. But it's different now. I don't wake up with that weight on my chest. I don't wonder what they're planning. I don't wait for calls that never come or visits that only bring pain. I wake up in peace. I made my coffee and went out to the patio. The flowers I planted last month are starting to bloom. Yellow roses. I always liked yellow roses, but Brandon used to say they were common, that roses should be red or white. Now I have a whole garden of yellow roses, and no one tells me they're common. The doorbell rang while I was watering the plants. It was Karen with a basket of freshly baked pastries. I thought we could have breakfast together, she said, smiling. I'd love that. We sat in the kitchen, the same one where I had served so many meals to a son who never appreciated them. But now that kitchen has new memories. Breakfasts with Karen, lunches with Mr. O'Brien, dinners with the ladies from the knitting group I joined last month. Did you hear? Karen asked, spreading butter on her pastry. Brandon left town. Someone saw him getting on a bus with 2 suitcases. That was all he had left. I know, I replied. Tom told me. And how do you feel? I took my time answering. I took a sip of coffee. I looked out the window at my garden. I feel like I've closed a very long and very sad book, and now I'm ready to start a new one. Karen smiled and took my hand across the table. You're an inspiration, Eleanor. Truly. After she left, I got a call from Tom. Eleanor, I have news. Remember the 22 seniors you helped relocate? Of course. One of them, an 82-year-old man named Mr. Arthur Pembroke, turns out to be quite wealthy. He has a generous pension and properties, but he had no family to look after him, which is how he ended up in Sunny Hills. He wants to meet you. He wants to thank you personally. That's not necessary, Tom. I did it because it was the right thing. I know, but he insists. And there's something else. He and 5 other seniors from the group are pooling money to start a foundation. A foundation to help seniors in situations of abuse or neglect. They want you to be on the board of directors. I sat in silence, processing that. A foundation helping others who are going through what I went through. Eleanor, are you still there? Yes. Yes, I'm here. Tell Mr. Pembroke I would be honored to meet him, and that yes, they can count me in for the foundation. When I hung up, I sat in my living room looking around. This house that Brandon wanted to sell from under me. This house that to them was just a $300,000 transaction. This house was my life, my history, and now it would also be the beginning of something bigger. That afternoon, I went to the bank, not to cash my pension check, but to open a new account. An account for the foundation. I deposited the $10,000 I had left from my savings after helping with the relocations. It was a small start, but beginnings are always small. When I left the bank, the sun was beginning to set. I walked through the park near my house. I saw families strolling, children playing, elderly couples holding hands. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel envy. I didn't feel pain for what I lost, only gratitude for what I found. I found my strength. I found my voice. I found my worth. I got home as it was getting dark. I turned on the lights and made myself a simple dinner. Vegetable soup, toast, a glass of water. I ate slowly, savoring every bite. No one was looking at me with contempt. No one was making me feel like I didn't deserve to be there. After dinner, I took out my phone and looked at the old photos. There was one of Brandon when he was 5 years old, smiling with a missing front tooth, covered in mud after playing in the park. I was behind him in the photo, laughing, too. That woman in the photo, that happy mother, she did the best she could. She loved with everything she had. It wasn't her fault that her love wasn't enough to create a good man. Some trees grow crooked no matter how much sun they get. I deleted the photo. I deleted all the photos of Brandon. Not with anger, with acceptance. That chapter of my life was closed. The blank pages ahead were mine to fill as I wished. I went to bed early that night. But before I did, I wrote something in my journal, something I needed to put on record. Asterisk, my name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 72 years old. For most of my life, I was defined by my relationships. Wife of, mother of, widow of. But those definitions were given to me by others. Now I define myself. I am Eleanor, survivor, fighter, free woman. My story didn't end when my husband died. It didn't end when my son betrayed me. My story is just beginning. Asterisk. I closed the journal and turned off the light. In the darkness of my room, I thought about everything that had happened. How I had started as a silent victim and ended as a quiet warrior. I didn't need to shout to be heard. I didn't need violence to win my battle. I just needed courage. The courage to see the truth. The courage to act. The courage to let go of what no longer served me, even if that something carried my last name. Tomorrow, I have a meeting with Mr. Pembroke and the other seniors. We're going to start planning the foundation. We're going to create something that helps others not suffer what we suffered. We're going to turn our pain into purpose. And after the meeting, I'm going to the salon. I'm going to get my hair cut, a modern cut, something different. Because I'm tired of looking in the mirror and seeing the same old woman. I want to see the new Eleanor. The Eleanor who was born from the ashes of betrayal. Somewhere in this city, or maybe in another city, Brandon is starting his new life. I hope he learned something. I hope one day he looks back and understands what he lost. Not the money, not the house, but a mother who would have loved him unconditionally until her last breath if he had only been worthy of that love. But that's not my problem anymore. He chose his path. I chose mine. And my path is one of light, of peace, of purpose. I fell asleep with a smile on my lips. I dreamed of my garden full of yellow roses. I dreamed of a house full of new laughter. I dreamed of a life that was finally my own. Because in the end, that's what this always was. Not a story of revenge, but a story of liberation. Of a woman who was lost and found herself. Of a mother who stopped being one so she could simply be Eleanor. My name is no longer tied to theirs. My story is no longer defined by their betrayal. My life is no longer in their hands. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 72 years old, and my story is just beginning. This time I'm the one writing it, in my own words, on my own terms. And no one, absolutely no one, can take that away from me. I woke up knowing that every day to come is a gift I gave to myself. I didn't wait to be saved. I saved myself. I didn't wait for justice from heaven. I built it with my own 2 hands. And if there's one thing I want other women to know, other mothers, other elderly women who are going through what I went through, it's this: it is never too late to defend yourself. It is never too late to say enough. It is never too late to take your life back. A mother's love is powerful, but self-love is more powerful still. And I finally learned to love myself more than I loved the idea of being a mother. That lesson took me 71 years to learn, but now that I know it, nothing and no one can take it from me. My name is not theirs anymore. My story is just beginning.